Okay, Harry, when you're ready.
Hello, I'm Harry Toole, and this is the PowerPoint I've made for my specialist research. For this research, my chosen discipline was narrative design, and here I've got some points on why I chose to do narrative design. Obviously, possibilities of different topic areas. I thought there would be a lot I could potentially look at. Lots of sources. Narrative design is a relatively big thing, and it's in lots of things. Not only games, but movies, all those things. Very open disciplines, kind of rehashing the first point, and a general personal interest. My chosen topic is setting and narrative themes in games and how they're created. On the left there, I've got some examples of settings, and on the right here, a list of common themes for lots of stories. Why choose this topic? Well, I think that there's lots of content I can get out of it. Again, personal interest, lots of sources, and it may influence the work that I do for my FMP. Some of the initial questions that I had going into this project was, what is theme, what is setting? As obvious as they might sound, I want to define the line between the two to obviously help me with the research I do to make doubly sure that I'm looking at the right things. What games have good examples of themes, setting, what themes and or settings are popular, and how I can potentially create my own. So I started off by looking at, as I mentioned, theme and setting and what they are. And the general definitions of theme is essential topic, subject, or message within a narrative. And below there's a small little diagram of how theme influences story and plot of any narrative. On the right here is setting. Setting's the physical location, time location within a narrative. It can be fiction or non-fiction, and I've included an image of London from one of the Assassin's Creed games. The name escapes me at the moment, but I think that's a good blend between fiction and non-fiction. For research into examples of themes, I looked at a game called Garden Story, one of my current favourite indie games at the moment. And there are themes throughout the story of personal growth, loss, war, and helping those in need. And on somewhat the other side of that coin, I've looked at Half-Life 2, which deals with themes of war, oppression, civil unrest, and resistance. Looking into settings, I've looked at Pinata Island from the game of Pinata and Diamond City from Fallout 4. Obviously, these two very contrasting settings, with Pinata Island being very colourful, very bright, and a very quite positive atmosphere, whereas Diamond City is a relative opposite of that. Obviously, it's an alternate future and apocalypse, and it's very gritty and dirty. In order to find out what people like, what players like to see with their themes and their settings, I sent out a questionnaire, and I found that when it comes to settings, there's lots of varieties that people like. People like playing in different areas, people like seeing games with different settings, whereas when it comes to themes, people like relatively the same thing. With some examples here of, war, war and oppression, apocalypse, those sorts of things. In order to do some research into how a setting can be created, I decided to look at some articles, some sources on ideas and tips for creating a setting. And some of the key points I took away from that was using place to your advantage. Obviously, the more you know about a certain area in real life will influence that. Show the world through the character's eyes, whatever the character is in this instant. Make sure that the setting you're trying to portray, especially in a game sense, if it's, let's say, a starting area, really reflects their character. Use what you know. Let's say, for me, for example, growing up in England, if I were ever to create a setting, it would probably be within my best interest to use what I know from growing up and from living here, and make the setting fit the story. Of course, this one, not too much, doesn't matter that much, because obviously settings and stories can be intertwined, but sorry, I forgot my point. But if you're having a story of like abandonment or like someone's been deserted somewhere, traditionally that would be done perhaps in a forest or a woods or a very remote area as opposed to a big city. In terms of action research, what I decided to do after looking into that was come up with a small concept for a possible game setting, a small story, and how I would integrate narrative themes into that. And I felt that I, from what I'd learned, managed to do that quite well using all the points. What I found that surprised me in this research was, first of all, the number of different themes that a narrative can have. Looking into it, there are lots of different overarching themes of a narrative that can be implemented, and looking into a few indie games, those themes can be very personal. Player likes and dislikes. I was very surprised, as I show you, to find that in terms of setting it's quite varied, but in terms of theme, players seem to like the same thing. Obviously how themes can be personal, I just mentioned, and having a central theme can help create a story, as I found when I was creating my concept. So my conclusion is, what I conclude from my research is that narrative themes are very important for a story. Lots of time and effort is put into creating a story. When I was trying to come up with my own concept, it wasn't a quick process. I had to do lots of thinking, hence why I thought making a mind map would be best. As I mentioned again there, players like a wide variety of settings and they like similar narrative themes. Choosing a setting for a story can also be difficult if you don't have a theme. If you don't have an overarching theme, creating a narrative story and then a setting can become a little bit more difficult. Did I answer my initial questions? Personally, I thought that throughout my research I had answered them, and further research how this will, what I will do with this in the future, this I'm mainly thinking will help me for my final project, as I'll possibly be able to use some of this information when I come to make that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Harry. Yeah, seems like you've got a lot you could use for your design intention for your FMP. We'll talk more about that this afternoon, but yeah, good. Okay, Jack?